Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. Now this week we are revisiting retro gaming. There's a couple of cool projects that we're going to look at. We're also going to be announcing the winners of the Inkplate 6 Plus competition along with a lot of other fun things. But for now, let's get started with the show. We're beginning the show with a number of awesome projects. In fact, there were slightly too many to fit into this week's show, so we're going to go slightly longer on projects and still not fit them all in. Maybe I'll put some in next week's show. But we're starting with a fantastic project using Bop It, a popular rhythm game of the late 90s right up until now in various iterations, that's been modified using a Raspberry Pi Pico to control the game Minecraft. It's a fantastic project. Yes, this is a video from Seth Altobelli on YouTube, and as always, of course, there will be a link in the description to this video, and it is a hilarious and very detailed run-through of how he turned a Bop It into a completely usable motion controller on Minecraft. Now, the idea is he's going to give it to Technoblade, who's another very popular and very funny Minecraft streamer, who famously completed Minecraft using a steering wheel. This is a bit of a level above, because the modification here would have been very, not easy, but my immediate thought would be, okay, let's just take all the buttons and make all the buttons do something. But this goes one step further. Seth decided to put an inertial measurement unit, like an accelerometer block in there, so that when you tipped the Bop It in different directions, you could use that to control movement. It's a really, really fantastic project. Now, here it is in action, and you can see that by tilting it forwards and moving it from side to side, he's able to move the player character around. So essentially that's W, S, A, and D in terms of moving forwards, backwards, and strafing. And all of the other buttons do all of the most common buttons you would require for Minecraft, like right-click for placing blocks, left-click for breaking them, opening inventory, stuff like that. It's a wonderfully inventive idea, and the video goes into a lot more detail than I'm letting on here. There's a whole section on the vector maths required to make this work, and in fact there's a way he's included a way of calibrating it, which is really quite inventive. It's worth watching the whole video for that, and I suggest you do so. Hey folks, Future Ian here. You may have noticed that in this frame, as well as the video in question and my face, there is a photonic induction video from just 5 days ago. Now, those of you that have been around in Maker YouTube and general electronics YouTube for a while will probably know who Photon is, and will know that he disappeared from the internet and various people were a little worried about him. He is back, and back with a vengeance. It seems like some of the issues that were going on in his life have been resolved in terms of the Home Office and his wife and getting her to stay in the country, and he is now back to YouTube. It is very nice to see him looking good. It is very nice to see him exploding huge things, and as you can see, he's back to his old tricks, popping a 5,000 amp fuse. Yeah, I just thought I'd point that out for those of you that are fans of him. He's back, he seems well, and I'm very glad to see it. Moving on to the Virtual Boy. Now, Virtual Boy was, by all accounts, Nintendo's worst console, completely. It was awful. I've never had my hands on one personally. I have seen one in real life. Many people have never even heard of them, and there's a good reason why. It was like VR before VR was possible. It was a horrible red-black monochrome display that gave everyone a headache within minutes of using it, and is widely remembered as the worst console of all time. Surprise, surprise, someone has decided to create a handheld version of it in a hope of giving it some kind of repentance. Now, right off the bat, I want to make something very, very clear. This is not an emulator. This isn't a screen with a Raspberry Pi behind it, just with a red sheen on it or anything like that. This is an actual Virtual Boy that has been modded to the point of being a viable handheld. This is an enormous undertaking, and it is quite rightly being celebrated quite widely on the internet right now by a lot of people. Now, I want to be clear that this is not just a show-off video. This is an incredibly detailed teardown and reverse engineering of the Virtual Boy before taking it and completely redesigning the way that it works, essentially. As well as being incredibly informative, it's a hilarious video. There's a huge amount in here. I was familiar with the name Shank Mods beforehand. It is a well-known YouTube channel, but it's been a while since I have been so compelled all the way through a half-hour video about a build like this. It is truly brilliant, if you are interested in trying to mod your own old Virtual Boy that is gathering dust in the attic, there is also instructions in the description of his video as to how you can get the custom PCBs made as part of it. But yes, this is just an astonishing build, yeah, I loved this part, seeing it all come together, incredibly satisfying. This is going to be a wonderfully satisfying video, even for those of you who watch the show who aren't so into retro gaming. I do understand that not everyone is into it. That's why I don't pack retro gaming devices into every show. But this one takes it a little bit further. This is a work of art, a real thing of beauty, and yeah, massive congratulations to Shank Mods for making this thing work at all. It's been a while since we had any ETA Prime on the show, so let's remedy that quickly. This video is what I would consider more ETA Prime's regular fare. It is a retro gaming special. It is how to build the epic retro gaming / mobile gaming device. Now, mobile gaming doesn't really appeal to me. There are some gems out there, but emulation is something that I am quite interested in. And this will emulate everything from your old Atari and NES games right up to things like the Wii, which that's quite a powerful thing to emulate. But yep, apparently this Samsung Galaxy Tab, what is it? Samsung Galaxy Tab S6, refurbished, bought for $300, will play everything including Wii games, which is, yeah, pretty special. So the video covers things like controllers you can get. As you can see here, this is like a tablet controller. It also goes over a few benchmarks, and there's lots of examples of different games being played as well. The ones I found amazing is like just GameCube working perfectly like this, and GameCube is apparently one of the ones that's a little bit harder to emulate for whatever reason, but this is amazing. If you look at this, this is Nintendo Wii running at 60 frames per second on a tablet. That to me is just close enough to the present time that it's almost eerie. I mean, I was still in university when the Wii was a very relevant console and people were playing games that were, yeah, really high quality on it. I watched a friend of mine play Resident Evil 4, which at the time, well, it was high level in terms of graphics as far as I was concerned, played through that on a Wii. Kind of amazing. But there's another trick up the sleeve when it comes to Samsung. And that is Samsung DeX. As you can see here, I think this is just the regular screen mirroring here's going here. But if you, yes, Samsung DeX is essentially like a operating system designed to work from a tablet or phone, which turns your tablet or phone into a touch pad. And allows you to use the screen. I've actually used this once in an office environment. I very briefly had a Samsung phone, and it really is legitimately useful. All you need to do is borrow a keyboard and a monitor, of which there were many just not really being used in the office I was working in. And on a day where I just dropped in really to drop off some paperwork, and they did need me to do some copywriting, I didn't have to worry about borrowing a laptop or going home. It was, yeah, a very, very cool thing to be able to do. So yes, I will leave a link to this in the video. It's been a while since we had a retro game appropriate ETA Prime video on the channel, so I thought it was high time we fixed that. Some time ago, I featured a project called the Arduino Lo-Fi Orchestra, and for obvious reasons, it's something that I really loved. It's only simple DIY electronic music projects blog, and I wanted to feature them again because they have a fantastic project using the Raspberry Pi Pico. And here we are. And this is a toy keyboard USB matrix decoder using the Pi Pico. Let me just quickly show you what that means. So what you were seeing in this image is the guts of a toy keyboard that was broken, no longer worked, and the electronics were completely destroyed. But what did still work is all of the switches and the way they attach to the PCB. So these ribbon cables you see running out here are running to a Pi Pico, which is decoding what note is what and sending it via USB to the Raspberry Pi, which is creating the tones. A wonderful project, and as always, like I've said so many times, I really like it when things are reused. Taking an old toy keyboard and turning it into a MIDI keyboard essentially gives you a free MIDI controller. This one especially hits home to me because for pretty much the entirety of the time that this show has been running, you've probably noticed the keyboard on the wall just behind me here. Now, this keyboard used to work. It was never in tune. It never made any particularly nice sounds, but I picked it up, I think, from a second-hand market somewhere when I first moved to Berlin. But yeah, now it is sadly end of life. And it's something that I did used to use to make music for YouTube videos, and it has been sadly just sitting and doing nothing. And I can't help but think that with the power of the things that I learned from this blog and the fact that I have multiple different microcontroller development boards, including Pi Picos and various others sitting around, it's high time I made it do something. But anyway, less about my future plans and more about what has already been done by the fantastic DIY electronics music blog. So this blog post, which I will of course link in the description, talks about exactly how the circuit works. Now, in this particular case, you have an 8-part ribbon cable here, and I think a 4-part ribbon cable here. This represents rows and columns of a matrix. And if you have ever messed around with multiplexing before, you will know that essentially you are creating your own matrix system for creating more input possibilities than there are pins on your microcontroller. Rather than me try to explain it in detail here, which I would mess up, or even the blog writer tried to explain it, there is links throughout this blog for further reading for all of these things if you are interested in learning not only what this does, but more about the science behind it, the electronics behind it. You can find that. In fact, this blog in general, I would like to give a shout out that throughout reading it, it doesn't really matter what level of proficiency you have. There is always helpful links to first principles of almost every part of it. It's really a special blog. I'm glad I'm getting to feature it on the show again. So yes, as mentioned, here are the ribbon cables coming out of the little PCB that was in the keyboard itself, going into the Pi Pico, and then the blog post goes on to talking about the code, which uses CircuitPython as a way of working out which switch is which, and sending the correct Midi symbols via USB to the Raspberry Pi that was making the sound. Another fantastic project from this blog, but as I said last time I featured the blog on the show, I am sorry if you go here because you will be here for some time. And the final thing we are looking at this week is a spam filter enclosed in a can of spam. What a wonderful idea this is. Now, this does look like an unopened can of spam. I assure you there is not spam inside this. There is, in fact, an Orange Pi Zero, an absolutely tiny single-board computer, unsurprisingly with the name, designed to be a little bit like the Raspberry Pi Zero, although there are a number of advantages to the Orange Pi Zero. But yes, this is a fantastic little device. It's basically running Pi-hole, which, as you know, blocks all adverts and spam on your network. This I found on Hackaday, and I will link the Hackaday article in the description, but this first link here goes to the Twitter account, Daniel Hepper. This is the maker. And as you can see, what a wonderful little thing this is. There is the can of spam, and there is the back. And yeah, just a very simple, nice little panel here. It's got a USB connector here, and it also has an Ethernet port because happily the Orange Pi Zero takes power over Ethernet. If you aren't familiar with the Orange Pi Zero, here it is. It is a very, very small board that uses an all-winner chip. I've talked about it and written about it in depth before. I, in fact, have an Orange Pi Zero 2 sitting over there on the shelf, which I've been looking for something to do with. I did wonder about some power over Ethernet ad blocking thing at some point, but I just haven't had the time to play with it. One thing you might notice here is this nice little ribbon cable. It's just a tiny little bit too big to fit in the spam tin when the SD card is in there. So there's an extender here, which is bringing it up over the top so that it fits neatly into the can. And yes, spam blocked in a can of spam is a fantastic idea and a lovely project. Before we move on, a little quick housekeeping. So if you are enjoying the show, there are a number of ways you can help us on YouTube for free. That is, if you're watching a video and you are thinking, hey, this is good, I'd like to see more of it, one of the things you can definitely do to help us is subscribing to the channel. That won't change the way you use YouTube all that much, but it will mean that there's a much higher chance of it showing up on your home screen when you go to YouTube, and if you click the subscription tab, our videos will show up there. Another great way to support us is by enabling notifications for the show. Under the little bell here, if you click all, it means every single time a show is uploaded to this channel, you will get a notification in the top corner here. You'll see a little 1 there. I already clicked this, which why it isn't there. I should point out these notifications are only within the YouTube website. This is not a system-wide notification. You won't be getting spammed by us when you're in the middle of an important meeting. But again, this is just a very good way of letting YouTube know that you like our show enough to be subscribed to the channel and to get notifications when something is uploaded to it. We only put out one Electromaker Show a week. You won't be getting spammed from us. And of course, another great way you can support us is by clicking like on any given video. It's just a nice way of letting YouTube know that you like it. Now, a really, really direct way to support the show is to use the Electromaker shop. If you head to electromaker.io and look under the shop tab, you will find a plethora of things that are great for almost every kind of project, split into different categories or split into different suppliers. So yeah, this is by far the best way you can support the show, although of course it is a financial way to support the show, whereas the other ways are free. There is no obligation, but if you are looking for stuff for a project, please do consider looking at the electromaker.io shop. And Electromaker now has a Discord server. It's still relatively new, people are just finding it, but there is a link to it in the description of this video, and indeed every video, and it is a great place to come and show off your projects or just generally hang out. We're really just getting up and going with it, but there's already been a bunch of fantastic posts and some good conversation in here, and there's also a channel for the NXP Hackathon, which is a contest that is currently ongoing on the Electromaker website. There'll be channels for all of our contests, and yes, if you are interested in Discord, if you are a user of Discord, do come and say hello. We really are just getting started with this, but I cannot wait to see what you folks come up with and share in the channels. Anyhow, that is more than enough advertising. Thank you so much for indulging me. Let's get on with the show. The show is already very full of projects, but we are going to have a very quick whistle-stop funding website things with just one product, and that product is a Quark, or Quark, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And for a product with a suitable Star Trek relevant name, it certainly looks very futuristic, and it is a very compelling little device. You may guess, just by the shape and the look of it, that this is essentially a thing for probing devices electronically. But it seems like it's going to be capable of quite a lot. But yes, let's have a quick read, shall we? Quark is an easy-to-use Arduino-compatible multi-tool intended to simplify and open source the development of electronic devices on Arduino, ESP32, STM32, and more. So yes, it's a handheld probe, essentially. And you can see here the inside of it, and it has various things that other kind of like handheld multimeter probe things don't have, like, for example, a smartphone app, if that's something that you would be interested in. But you don't need to use the app, as it says somewhere here. Yes, if you don't want to connect an app, it's fine. Quark works just as well without it. And also, I don't know why, but seeing this really pleased me. I don't know why a probe to USB-C connector pleased me so much, but it did. Yes, there's a lot to unpack here, too much for me to read right now, but it just looked so wild that I really wanted to fling it up on the show. Leave a link to it so you can read through this yourself. There is a set of specifications here. It does a little bit more than just read. It is a signal generator as well. Yeah, there's, I don't know, nothing I've seen that's quite like this. It is an interesting thing. However, this is pre-launch. We have no idea how much it's going to cost. If you are interested, you can, of course, add your name to the box here. But yes, Quark, as I'm going to call it, because that's how you say it where I live, or Quark, as the man from Star Trek himself would say, is a simple open-source wireless Arduino-based electronics multi-tool with a full-color screen and touch-based controls, and it looks very, very interesting indeed. It is time we announce the winner of the competition started last week on the show, and that is for the contents of this box. And as I mentioned last time, I'm not going to open it because, as you can probably see, there's a rather nice ink plate sticker on it, which should give you a clue as to what's inside. Yes, that is right. To celebrate our 1-year show, Inkplate were kind enough to send us one of the new Inkplate 6 Plus e-paper connected maker displays. And now they've made many of these in the past. They've all been great successes on Crowd Supply. As you can see, this one is currently in the funding stage, so it's very special to have one to give away. And I said on last week's show that if you enter the competition by being a subscriber to the website, saying what you're going to do with the Inkplate and hashtagging it Inkplate, we would pick a winner from the comments based on that, and it is time to do so. Now, there were a bunch of fantastic ideas in the comments, but there was one definite winner, and that was Daniel van Rensselaer, because the idea of using it as a frame-by-frame animation tool is something that had never occurred to me. And even though what Daniel is talking about is something a little bit different, it reminded me of something that I used to own. A few years ago, I was given as a present something called a butter board. Now, this is a board which you paint on using just water, and it will allow you to paint essentially in monochrome, in black and white, and that image will just fade away slowly. And yeah, this was definitely the winning entry from my perspective. In fact, it inspired me to fiddle around a little bit in P5.js. So if you would permit me a slight tangent. The idea of technology as an artist's tool is something that I find quite compelling. Much like Daniel's winning comment is talking about using it as an animation tool rather than using paper, it inspired me to reapproach a project that I kind of thought through and never did a while ago, and that is to make a digital butterboard. Now, what is a butterboard? Well, in real life, a butterboard is a sheet that reacts to water, and you can paint whatever you want on it, no matter how beautiful it is. It could be the best work of art you ever make. The water will dry, and the water will evaporate, and as it does, it will disappear. And I wanted to try and recreate it digitally, and this is P5.js, which is a very nice little JavaScript online playground. And yeah, just messing around with monochrome. This has got me thinking that this might be a nice thing to reapproach. Because if you did have a nice little monochrome touchscreen, not necessarily an ink plate, it could be anything that you could touch and that you could change the size of the brush strokes, because they don't have to fade away this fast. And in fact, when you take it out of the material world and turn it into the more digital realm, you could make anything happen. How hard you press it could change the color. Different colors could fade away at different times. There's a lot you could do with this. So yes, tangent over. I just wanted to show you that not only was your comment a prize-winning comment, it inspired me to reapproach something that I had forgotten about for some years. So thank you for that, Daniel. Anyway, tangent very much over. Congratulations, Daniel. We'll be in touch with you as to how we can get this Inkplate 6 Plus out to you. And please do document on the Electromaker website or head to the Discord or whatever you want to do. Whatever you make with this, I would love to see it because, as I say, yeah, you have inspired me this week. I'm sure you'll inspire a lot more people with whatever you do with this. But that is our prize for this week. We're just going to give this one away. Next week, we'll be back to a regular mystery box competition where you can win something random from the box of mystery. It is a mystery box. There are mystery things inside the box. There are boxes of mystery inside the mystery box, and inside those boxes of mystery are mystery items. I've over-explained this. It's time to get on with the show. We're going to close out this show with a little bit of news about new products and a really interesting article about teaching and the Pi 400. But first, the Jetson Xavier, the AGM Xavier, is a very, very powerful single-board computer. There's actually a new version of it coming out. Now, the news is embargoed at the time of recording this, but the embargo will be lifted by the time the show comes out. So I don't have actually a huge amount of information about it, but I did think it was interesting enough to mention on the show. So yes, as mentioned, the news is embargoed. So here is a PDF that was sent about it. And essentially, the Jetson AGX Xavier is getting an industrial version, which is, of course, mostly designed for commercial uses in factories, in aerospace. They specifically mentioned the oil and gas industry. But those of you who were wanting to maybe try and put something with incredibly high levels of computing power, maybe if you're doing some kind of machine learning or vision project, into a really rough environment, this is tailor-made for that. So rather than go through the specs of the Xavier, we've talked about that before, this is what I thought was sort of interesting. The key industrial features, it has nothing to do with exactly how powerful it is. This is what it can take. So it can work operationally from minus 40 degrees Celsius up to 85 degrees Celsius. That's a massive temperature difference. And there's a bunch of other things in here that I thought were interesting as well. Now, usually I'd just say, I'm not going to go through all of this. There'll be a link in the description of this video. I'm not sure that there will be at this time. However, by the time this video comes out, this news will no longer be embargoed, and I'm sure you will be able to find it. If I do find a list, a link to a very nice rundown of all of the different features this has, maybe there'll be one on CNX Software. It seems like they're beat. I will add a link to it in the video description after the fact. But since this literally landed on my desk just before I was recording it, and I looked at it and went, "Oh, that's cool," I thought you might find it cool as well. Moving on to the RP2040, that is the silicon that Raspberry Pi put out for the Raspberry Pi Pico. Now, there is a bunch of different boards out now that have this chip in. Arduino have put one out, Adafruit have put several out, Sparkfun have, Pimoroni have, lots of different designs. Adafruit have just put one out, though, which is different in a really wonderful way. But if I sounded strangely hesitant when I said in a really wonderful way, it's because when I first looked at this, my first impression was, well, where are the GPIO pins? What am I supposed to do with this? It's, you know, you can see there's a USB port here. This is a USB key with an RP2040 on it. It plugs straight into your USB drive rather than having to use a cable. And yeah, my initial thought was kind of like, well, what use could that possibly be? But the more I thought about it and the more I realized that, you know, the stemmer, the QT connectors that Adafruit use are a fantastic way of getting multiple different kinds of sensors and output options clicked into a board without having to worry about any kind of circuitry. I'm beginning to come round to the idea. And in fact, I'm now really super, super excited about this. And this is why. Once I saw this, it completely made sense to me. The idea of just having two simple components just in your pocket and then being able to plug them into the USB port of pretty much any computer and loading up Thonny and then getting MicroPython going, you could teach someone the very basics of how to get a microcontroller up and running. You could pass that spark of joy on within moments without having to worry about breadboard setup, without having to worry about having the right kind of power. Yes, of course, you could do this just as easily plugging in. I absolutely understand there are other stemmer QT boards out there. There are other boards you can plug in very easily, but there's something about this has really grabbed my imagination. However, it is, unfortunately, at the time of recording this, out of stock. They went out of stock very, very quickly, as far as I can tell. But yeah, I am really quite happy that there are options like this out there, because getting this screen up and running might take a little bit of doing, but there are such a huge amount of stemmer sensors and accessories for that work in all different kinds of ways. So for example, here is an absolute orientation inertial measurement unit, which has a stemmer QT connector, and they are chainable. So you could plug this in, you could plug a light sensor in, and more or less straight away you have enough sensors there to teach someone the basics of sensor-based manipulation using a controller here. With a little bit more fiddling around, you could probably get it so that it did stuff on screen. I haven't looked into it yet, but as I showed you earlier in the show, P5.js is a great way of making things appear on screen, and there was a little while ago a quite easy way to attach them to Arduino boards. I would be very surprised if there wasn't going to be some kind of easy way to attach them to MicroPython-based boards as well. Anyway, all my speculation aside, this looks like a very interesting little board, which at first I thought was kind of a useless idea, and the more I think about it, the more I think if I was going to choose to teach someone the basics of microcontrollers, I would probably take something like this, because it's incredibly simple. If you housed it, it would look just like a USB key, but a USB key that you could plug a small string of LEDs into. Not enough to worry the USB port, but enough to show someone, hey, in 5 minutes, let's code something that'll make these flash in a certain way that you choose. And what better way to get someone excited about this than that? And speaking of inspiring educational ideas, this last thing I want to show you is an article that was sent to me by my colleague Mo. This is someone who's taken it upon themselves to take a Raspberry Pi 400, in fact several, out to a public library, completely self-funded, to educate, to teach people about Python, to get kids excited about programming. It's just a wonderful read, and I wanted to just give it a quick shout out before the show ends. And this is the article. It's from opensource.com, written by Don Watkins. And there will, of course, be a link to it in the description. And it is just a very simple account of why and how he is teaching Python using the Raspberry Pi 400. As I said, this is completely self-funded. This is equipment that he is providing to the students, to the library for free. It's just a really, really lovely idea. And one thing through, I would like you to go and read this for yourself. This is just a textbook, beautiful way of describing how and why you should educate and how you can get started doing it and how simple it could be. But one thing that I really love about this is this sentence here. So, since we are meeting in a public library, I emphasize that the library has books covering the concepts and Python programming code used in class, especially Teach Your Kids to Code by Bryson Payne and Python for Kids by Jason Briggs. The idea that you go to a library to learn something from someone and then that person says, yes, you can learn from me, but look around you. This is a place of learning is a beautiful idea. Everything about this makes me very, very happy. And it makes me very, very inspired when hopefully, eventually, we can start to do things like this here, that I might be able to do something like this myself. Although the chances of me doing that in the German language are slim. I may have lived here for 7 years, but my German is dreadful. That was our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. As previously mentioned, there are ways you can support the show on YouTube. There are ways you can support the show by going to the electromaker.io store, and you can of course join our Discord server. And I'd just like to thank you all once again for the amount of support you are showing us. The comments on last week's video, our 1 year-ish video, were really humbling. Not only that people want to come and watch the show, people think it is of a high quality. And to me, that means quite a lot, because at the end of the day, I may have been doing this for a year, but I still just feel like an idiot in an attic in Berlin who waffles at a camera. And I'm so glad it has some value to you. It certainly has a lot of value to me. But as always, I wish you a safe, creative, and fun week, and I will see you in the next one.